All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors. For Tafshin Pehei 5785, the Tilson Mishpacha, we're dedicating all the Shirim and Drashos this year as a zechus for besuros tovos for Am Yisroel. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves Haba Alinu L'Tova, the Kelman Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Shirim and Drashos in memory of Amit Ben David Levy, Zichrono Livracha, brother of Itay Levy, who was killed in Gaza on the first night of Chanukah. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu provide an aliyah for his neshama, a nechama for his family. We dedicate the learning, of course, in the zechus of all of our precious hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mir Hashem bring them home b'shalom and b'karov. And may HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow our holy soldiers to be successful b'chol ma'aseh yedeim. With that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Lamed Hey 35, and we are picking up in Mir Hashem on Lamed Daled Amud Beis 34b. We left off of Rabbi Meir, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 lines off on the bottom. So remember again, there was an interesting juxtaposition between the concept of adjudication of laws and negoim and the halachos of tzaras. So remember again, we're kind of continuing along that juxtaposition. The Gemara says as follows: for Rabbi Meir, Hay v'shavtu asa'am, b'chol eis my darish bey. What does Rabbi Meir do with that phrase v'shavtu asa'am b'chol eis? So Amrava la'asui yom ha'mu'unan. So I will say, so this is interesting, that as much as there is a juxtaposition between din and nigoim and saras, they're not totally the same. In what sense? That when it comes to a cloudy day, what happens on a cloudy day? This is actually quite interesting. So again, in general, when a kohen is examining a blemish to see whether or not it's saras, so he cannot examine it early in the morning, or for that matter in the morning, or in the evening, v'lo b'soch habayis, and not inside of a house, v'lo b'yom hamu'unan, and not on a cloudy day. Why? Because what happens on a cloudy day? Mivnei shekeah niris aza, because something that is dull could appear bright. V'lo b'sarayim mivnei she'abik, and not during the afternoon hour, or not during lunchtime hours, midday. Why? Mivnei she'aza niras keah, because ultimately, again, something that is dull appears bright. Something that is bright appears dull. So as I say, interestingly enough, so the idea over here is fascinating. When it comes to nigoim, you can only able to see nigoim, to look at it, to examine nigoim at certain hours during the day when the sun is just so. But if the sun is not in its correct, we call it not in its optimal position, it could go ahead and really portray a nega in a different type of fashion. So that Rabbi Meir says, suppose it's just to point out over here, Saloch al-Maisa, that only applies to negoim, it doesn't apply to din. As much as you have this juxtaposition between negoim and saras, so whereas saras you can only look at during certain times of day, this concept does not apply by din. So you can even go ahead and adjudicate a case even on a very cloudy day. Rabbi Meir, what does Rabbi Meir do with that phrase? B'yom hanchilo esbanav. What does he do with that? So the Gemara says, "Hahumi b'ayle lechedetani Rabba Bar Chanina kamed Rav Nachman v'yom hanchilo esbanav." So he uses it for the following. What does it mean when the pasuk says it will be on the day that he bequeaths to his son? B'yom atamapil nachalos. During the day, you can go ahead and divide up inheritance portions. V'yatamapil nachalos balayla. But you can't go ahead and divide up inheritance portions at night. So Amalei Alameata, Man Deshachiv V'Yamama Yarsin Leibane, Man Deshachiv Balayla Lo Yarsin Leibane. So what if you die during the day? If you die during the day, so your sons inherit you. If you die at night, your sons won't inherit you. Is that what we're saying? To which the Gemara says, no, Dilma Din Nachlos Kamras. No, we don't mean actual like inheritance, or rather we mean actually the actual adjudication. Thank you, adjudication of inheritance law. In other words, that Allah, of course, whether someone dies by day or by night, your children will inherit them. But Beis Din will only engage in the actual adjudication of the estate during the day, not during the night. Pasuk says it will be for Bnei Yisrael again for a chukas mishpat. Ora kol parsha kula lihios din. Ultimately, the Torah tells us that often the distribution of an estate has to be treated like a complete legal matter, and therefore, again, follow those particular strictures. So we'll say, furthermore, it goes in accordance with Rabbi Rav. So what does Rabbi Yehuda say in the name of Rav? If three people went in to do Bikur Cholim, it's an interesting case. So what's the halacha? Rotzu kosvin, rotzu osin din. So let's say again the individual wants to go ahead and take care of matters of his estate. So when the three individuals walk in, they can either simply record what it is that the individual is conveying to them, or they can actually operate as a beis din as well. Shnayim, on the other hand, if there's two people walking in, kosin ve'in osin din, they could record what it is that's happening, but of course they can't become a beis din. That's only true if they're going to visit by day. But at night, they can record what they saw, but they cannot become a beis din. Why? Because when they come in the evening, they have the status of eidim. And what's the halacha? Ve'ed ein nasa dayon. We've seen this concept before. An eid, a witness, cannot transform into a judge. Amrlay in Haki Kamis. Yeah, that's what I meant as well. Okay, so we'll say so again. Quite a fascinating analysis. So again, remember the primary topic over here, we'll say to highlight was this concept that Dinei Mamanas, monetary law, could be adjudicated by day and could be ruled on by night. Right. Furthermore, again, remember monetary law can be adjudicated and ruled on that very same day. There is no need for any type of waiting period before delivery of a verdict. Okay, like we always see in Gemara, in the midst of all this, also, again, the Gemara brings in a number of other different related concepts. Okay, so let's go back there. Says the Gemara, Dinei nefashos dana bayom. So let's remember again. So dinei nefashos, capital cases, must be adjudicated by day, and remember again, must also be ruled on by day. Right, verdict must be delivered by day as well. So from where do you know this? The pasuk says, "V'huka osam laHashem neged hashemesh." So the pasuk literally says over here, quoting again from Bamidbar, so Vayomer Moshe kach es kol roshei ha'am v'hoka osa laHashem neged hashemesh v'yashav charna af Hashem Yisroel. So it's talking about again when there was unfortunately an episode of Avodah Zarah, right, worshipping of Baal Pa'ar. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, essentially execute all of the people who participated. We'll see what v'hoka means in just a moment, but he's lashon of neged hashemesh. What does neged hashemesh literally mean? Opposite the sun. Meaning what? That when you execute them, do it by day. Do it by day. Amar B'chista, minayin l'hoka shi tliya. How do we know that hoka is tliya, is hanging? Right? And essentially, again, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu was instructing Moshe Rabbeinu to hang the individuals who worshipped Avodah Zarah. Because the pasuk says, "V'hukan LaHashem v'givas Shaul b'chir Hashem." Uksiv, top of Lamed Hey, 35a, Uksiv, Vatikach Ritzba Bas Aya Esasak, Vatateu Lo El Hatzor Betrilas Ksir, Uksiv, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Kach es Kol Rashi Am Achatu, Kach es Kol Rashi Am. Well, so the Gemara brings up the raya from Vahuk Anum. It's actually the story in Navi, the story in Shmuel Beis, where Shaul went ahead and killed out the Givonim inappropriately, or a segment of the Givonim inappropriately. And halacha l'maisa again, the Givonim took revenge upon Shaul by hanging some of his sons. So the idea over here used lashon Vahuka to mean hanging. So you see from here again that the Torah is referring to execution of Ovdei Avodah Zarah, and it's telling us that execution of Ovdei Avodah Zarah is done neged hashemesh. It's done opposite the sun. Opposite the sun. So from here you see that execution is only carried out by day. Okay, so the Gemara says, just as an aside, remember the pasuk that we quoted before by Baal Pa'ar, when Klai's worship Baal Pa'ar, it says, Vayomer Shal Moshe, 35a, 3 lines down, Shal Moshe, Kach es kol Rashi ha'am, im ha'am chatu, Rashi ha'am ma chatu. So understand, remember, the pasuk indicates to us that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, gather up all of the heads of the nation and punish them. I don't understand. If the people sin, why are the heads of the nation held responsible? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Amar LaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Chalak Lahem. So we'll say, by the way, what's the Pashup Pshat? Right? If the people sin, why is the leadership responsible? Because that's what leadership is, right? Leadership means that the leader has complete responsibility for what happens to the constituents, what happens to the flock, right? Even if halacha l'maisa, he tried his best. This is, I think, kind of like when we look around. Well, leaving aside any societal commentary, but one of the most profound pieces, at least of the Jewish conception of leadership, is that if a person is the leader, the buck stops with them. So again, things go well, shkoyach. Things don't go well, things disintegrate within the constituency. The way that Torah at least sees that is a reflection on the leader. Again, it's not always a reflection on the leader, but the leader has to treat it as if it is a reflection on his leadership or lack thereof. That's the Pashat Pshat. But again, the Gemara wants to see is just something deeper involved over here. Interesting. So here, when Hashem says to Moshe, Kach es kol Rashi ha'am, what Hashem was actually telling to Moshe Rabbeinu was, gather the people, gather the heads of the nation, and establish batei din, set up courts. Now, why is setting up courts? Setting up courts in order to adjudicate all the people who worship Avodah Zarah. We want quick and expeditious judgment. So the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? Either mishum danin shnayim bayom. They both say, now remember, there was a court system already. Because remember again, this event was in Bamidbar. Yisro already came to Moshe Rabbeinu in just a couple of weeks ago now in Chumash Shmos. So what's going on over here? Why? So the Gemara says something very interesting. The Gemara says Hashem was telling Moshe Rabbeinu to set up extra courts. Now, why was there a need for extra courts? So maybe you'll say, mishum danin shnayim bayom. Maybe a Beis Din is not allowed to adjudicate 2 capital cases in one day. So here, what do we have? We have over here is a number of members of Klal Yisrael who, Rahman al-Islam, unfortunately went ahead and worshipped Avodah Zarah. They worship idolatry. So now what's the issue? The issue is maybe you're going to say, there is a court system, but you can't have one court judging more than one capital case at a time. So maybe halacha l'maisa, again, Moshe Rabbeinu has to set up more courts. So the Gemara says, well, one second. When can't a court adjudicate 2 capital cases? That's only if halacha l'maisa, again, it's 2 different types of capital cases. I don't know, I have a hereg and a chenek, a skila and a sreifa, something like that. Aval b'misa achos danin. This is actually interesting, but essentially, if halacha l'maisa, if you have 2 of the same type of case, in other words, 2 of the same crime, the same capital crime, those can actually be adjudicated by the same Beis Din on the same day. Look at Rashi for just a moment. So Rashi says over here, Ela b'shtei misos, it's almost right across. Hu de'in don lefi she'ein zo dom lezu, v'tzarach limso tam l'divreim kan, v'kan v'asi la kalkule shema lo yechbesu kechol hatzorach. So this is interesting. If it's 2 different types of capital cases, and remember, again, we've already seen before that really Beis Din is obligated to find a way to exonerate. That's really what's happening over here. So maybe when it's 2 different types of capital cases, so halacha l'maisa, they can't judge it. But if it's one type of capital case, maybe they can. So the Gemara says, misa achas danin ela kidei. So the Gemara says, Ela kadesh yashav charan af Yisroel. So halacha l'maisa, again, I will say this would not have been a problem with one Beis Din judging multiple cases. Why? Because the halacha is Beis Din could judge multiple capital cases when they are the same type of capital case. That's permitted. So why the need for extra batei din over here? To which the Gemara essentially answers, in order to go ahead and halacha l'maisa expedite judgment, so that literally again the wrath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be removed. Incredible. If you take a look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, Elo kidemu chachkra v'yashav charon af k'shakadosh Baruch Hu rosh shekula masukim b'davar u'mekanem l'chvodo. We'll say it's very interesting. How do you take away divine wrath? It's an interesting idea. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets angry, how do you remedy that anger? How do you remedy? Do whatever you can to expedite, to as expeditiously deal with the problem as possible. That wasn't good English, but you understand. In other words, how do you take care of divine wrath? Fix the problem. Fix the problem. That's how you take care of divine wrath. And therefore, again, if halacha l'maisa, there are a lot of people worshiping Avodah Zarah, what's the best way to remedy divine wrath? Go ahead and set up as many batei din as you can, so the cases can be adjudicated, judgment could be dealt, and move forward. So I'll say, it's such a profound yisod When does the Ribono Shel Olam get upset with us? We speak about this often. It's not when we sin. I mean, it is when we sin, but that's not real. Where real divine wrath comes from. Why? Because Kadosh Baruch Hu knows we're going to sin. Because we always sin. He created us with our frailties. So when does He get upset? He gets upset with us when we don't fix our problems. That's where the issue comes in. When I walk around life and I know that I have glaring issues, and yet I just refuse to do anything about it. So sometimes in life, I'm not sure what the problem is. As we get older, I recognize 98% of the time I know exactly what the problem is. So what's the issue? The issue is I'm just not ready, brave, or strong enough to fix it. And that's where divine wrath sets in. So the Baruch Hu says, I can forgive the transgression. I can forgive the misdeed. I can forgive the mistake. But I need you to engage in decisive action to remedy that which is broken. And if you fail to do that, that's when I really get upset. To make a mistake is forgivable. But to not fix it, that becomes unforgivable. Incredible. All right, let's go back there. Says the Gemara, Dinei Mamanes Gorim Bo Bayom. So it says, remember again, Dinei Mamanes, monetary law, is adjudicated, and the verdict can be delivered that day as well. Dinei Nefashos, right, capital cases, we wait to give the verdict till the next day. Right? You can't give it at night, and we have to wait till the next day. Wait till the next day in order to go ahead and make sure the basin has sufficient time to find the reason to exonerate. Says the Gemara, so from where do we know this? I will say, so the Gemara is asking over here, from where do we know that halacha l'maisa, we don't deliver the verdict on capital cases till the next day? Milesi mishpat tzedek yolin ba v'at tamaratzchim. So we'll say this is very interesting. So the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Yeshaya. So literally again, Melesi, Mishpat Tzedek. So in other words, so this is how the Gemara is dashing the pasuk. So how do you go ahead and ensure that Tzedek, that Mishpat Tzedek, that justice is fully served, that it's Malay? How? Yolin Ba. So what is Yolin Ba? What is Yolin Ba? Literally, sleep on it. Sleep on it, or really better stated, delay it. Delay it. Viata miratzchim. Because if you don't do this, ultimately, again, it's like you're engaging in bloodshed. So from here, the Gemara is darshaning that we go ahead and we delay the verdict on a capital case. So Rava says from here, Ishru chamutz. So it goes over here again, the pasuk from Yeshaya. Ashru chamutz. What does Ashru chamutz mean? Ashru dayin shemechametz es dino. Listen to this. Praiseworthy is the judge who literally makes his judgment chametz. Now, so what does that mean? How does something become chametz? How does it become chametz? You delay. You delay, right? You tarry. So praiseworthy, ashru chametz. Praiseworthy is the person. Ultimately, praiseworthy is the judge who delays his verdict. And again, the Gemara interprets this to a capital case the next day. As I just want to point out how incredible this is. There is another Maimer Chazal. What's the other Maimer Chazal? Mitzvah habali adecha al tachmitzena. Right? If a mitzvah comes your way, do not allow it to become chametz. So which one is? So isn't it fascinating? So in general, the halacha is whatever comes your way, whatever don't wait, don't tarry. And yet here, ashru dayin shemechametz es dino. So apparently, there's only one thing in life that you're supposed to allow to become chametz, and that's judgment. That's judgment. So we'll say a very profound yisod that for everything else in life, alacrity is the key. Jesus is the key. One thing, don't be besuros, and that is passing judgment on other people. Again, if we just apply this for our own lives, everything else in life, quickly, fast, alacrity, zechus. When it comes to passing judgment on other people, ashrav dayin shemechametz es hadin. Don't be so quick to judge. Let the judgment become chametz. Let it sit a little bit. Make sure you actually know what you're talking about. Try to gather all of the facts. Life, avoid chametz at all costs. Judgment, strive for chametz. Incredible. V'idach, the Rebbe will say, ashru chametz, what does this mean? Ashru chametz v'lo chometz. The other opinion says, or another interpretation also is, literally again, praiseworthy is the one who is the aggrieved party and not the aggressor. Meaning So Rashi points out over here that when a Beis Din sits in session, so they should try to make sure to advocate for the victim a little bit. In other words, that try to go ahead and address the needs of the victim before one addresses the needs of the aggressor. V'idach, hai melesi mishpat my avale. What does the other opinion do with this melesi mishpat? So Kid Rabbi Lazar Amar Yitzchak, cult is very interesting. Kultainis, shemalinin boes hatzdaka kilu shovech damen. So I'll say this is incredible. Any fast day, or after the fast day, balabatim delay in giving tzedakah, it's as if a person has spilled blood. Now, we'll say, what does this mean? Shneimar, milesi mishpat tzedek. Now, we'll say, so I'll point out to you over here. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. This is really fascinating. Rashi says, kol tainis, regilin hayu balele tainis, lasos tzedakah, v'hayu eime ha'aniyim nesuos lekach. Ve'im yalinu nimtsu aniyim re'evim shnishanu al-kach. So we'll say there was a very beautiful custom. What was the custom? That after a fast day, people would give tzedakah to the aniyim, right? Because the aniyim, again, usually I guess had very little generally, but on a fast day even less. So people would dafka give tzedakah after the fast. If you delay giving, and the aniyim would look forward to that. So if you go ahead and you delay giving tzedakah after the fast, there's almost like culpability for shedding blood. The aniyim are looking to that in such a dramatic way. If you don't do it, there's culpability. By the way, the hanimili berifta v'tamri. But that's only assuming a person was dispersing bread and dates. Ava bezuzi v'chiti, but again, bezuzi v'chiti v'sari, but if a balabas is giving out money or wheat or barley, meaning what? Not ready to eat food, less lanba. Then there is no culpability for that. So we'll say a really fascinating Gemara. Okay, but again, just to kind of keep on track, these drushes are absolutely beautiful, but just to keep on track. So remember again, for our purposes, what we begin to see over here is that halacha l'maisa, so capital cases can only be started by day. A verdict cannot be delivered at night, as opposed to monetary cases where it needs to be started by day, but verdict can be delivered at night. But now we see capital cases have this additional component. We don't want the verdict delivered that day. Again, if the Beis Din is going to exonerate, that's a different discussion. But assuming that they're not necessarily set on exoneration, they have to wait till the next morning. And again, all of this is part of the motif that we spoke about yesterday, which is that the halacha wants Beis Din to exonerate. They want them to they want them to deliver an innocent plea or an innocent verdict, and therefore again we make them delay delivery of the verdict till the next day. Okay, incredible. Let's go back there. Lefichach ein done. So we'll say now here's what's interesting. As a result of this, the Gemara says, so now that we know that anytime you're going to have a capital case, you're looking at what? What's the minimum duration? 2 days. 2 days, right? Now, it doesn't have to be that way, right? If Beis Din's going to exonerate, they could exonerate that day. But Lamaisa, whenever you begin a capital case, you have to look at the possibility of a minimum of a 2-day duration. As a result of that, what did the Mishnah say? You can't adjudicate capital cases on Erev Shabbos or Erev Yontiv, right? Because again, we'll see why, but can't go into Shabbos, can't go into Yontiv. Okay, so let's analyze this a little bit. Lefichach ein danin. So therefore the Mishnah said, therefore we don't adjudicate capital cases on an Erev Shabbos or an Erev Yontiv. So the Gemara says, my time. Well, what's the reason for this? Mishum delo efshar, because we can't structure a proper legal process if you're starting on an Erev Shabbos or an Erev Yontiv. Why not? So heichi le'avid. So friends, let's analyze this. So what should we do? Right? How should we play this? L'daine b'mali shabsa. So for example, let's say you begin the din Torah. Let's say we have a capital case, right? Reuben is accused of killing Shimon. So now Beis Din is going to be in session. So what are you going to do? You're going to start on Friday. So if you start on Friday, what's going to happen? L'daine b'mali shabsa. V'ligmarei l'dina b'mali shabsa. So let's say you start on Friday. Say chevra. It is our intention to finish on Friday. Right? We're going to start on Friday, intention to finish on Friday. We'll say, I just want to tell you something. We learned a tremendous musar, what you could accomplish still on a short Friday. We'll say, so those of you who were in the new shul on Sunday, saw beautifully, I know I'm biased. I think it's one of the most spectacular things in the entire world. Right? So if you would have seen, if you would have seen what that looked like on Friday morning, literally again, pieces everywhere, carpeting wasn't complete. So again, you can accomplish a lot even on a short Friday. It was a very good Musar Haskell. So we'll say, so L'naisa, but here, so let's say Beis Din says, okay, we're going to go and start it on Friday, end it on Friday. You can't do that. Why? Now again, that could work. Technically, how could it work? How could that happen? Innocent, right? If you exonerate, you're right, it could be done all of this in one day. However, till machazu tam lechova, uba leme'avad halanas din. See, the problem just is, maybe there'll be a reason to convict, or grounds to convict, in which case, by definition, we have to go on to day number 2. I will say, and therefore again, uba leme'avad halanas din. And that would push us onto Shabbos. Okay, so let's analyze this a little bit. So then it says the Gemara, l'daine b'malei shabsa, v'ligmer b'shabsa, v'liktale b'shabsa. So fine. So let's go ahead and begin the din, right? Adjudicate the case on Friday. And what's the worst case scenario? If you find him guilty, deliver the guilty verdict on Shabbos and execute him on Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, no. Ein ritzicha dochas haShabbos. We don't execute people on Shabbos. I want to point out something very interesting. You say to yourself, for 1 second, are you allowed to deliver a verdict? Is Beis Din allowed to sit in session on Shabbos? I'll tell you something interesting. So the halacha is mid'oraisa, there's not a problem. We don't convene Dinei Torah on Shabbos midrabanan. Why? It's one of the zeros, lest you come to ksiva, lest you come to writing. Right? Same way that you're not supposed to read the business section of the newspaper, right? You're not supposed to engage in business deals or business discussions. There's a whole bunch of gzeros, lest you come to write on Shabbos. So interestingly enough, adjudicating a case on Shabbos, technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a din d'Rabbanan. I just want to point out, that doesn't show up here. It's fascinating. It doesn't show up here. Obviously, again, that level of legislation wasn't yet in effect over here, which is just fascinating. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, okay, so let's adjudicate the case on Shabbos, and let's begin the case on Friday. One of two things is going to happen. If we find him innocent, and he's found innocent on Friday, shkoyach. And if there's a reason to delay judgment till Shabbos, and you go ahead and have to pass a guilty verdict on Shabbos, okay, so there'll be a guilty verdict on Shabbos. So let there be a guilty verdict on Shabbos and execute him on Shabbos. Execute him on Shabbos. So Shmuel says, no. Ein ritzicha dochas haShabbos. We do not execution, right? Because obviously killing someone, right? Shedding blood is one of the lamites malachos of shchita, and we don't execute on Shabbos. And even though again this is a mandated Beis Din execution, it's not dochas Shabbos. The Gemara says, okay, so v'liktale la'arta, execute him Matzei Shabbos. So adjudicate the case on Friday, deliver the verdict on Shabbos itself, and just delay the execution until Matzei Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, no, we just said before, neged Hashem ishpoinan. But we'll say when it comes to execution, when does execution have to be done? By day. So the Gemara says, okay, v'ligmerei l'dinei b'shabsa, v'liktale b'chai b'shabsa. So why don't you do this? Adjudicate the case on Friday, deliver the verdict on Shabbos, and have the execution on Sunday. Let's make a weekend out of it. Right? So go ahead, right? So let's do that. Let's do that. To which the Gemara says, no. Nimsa ata ma'ana es dino. So we're going to talk about this. There's the concept of inui din. Inui din ultimately again means unnecessary delaying of judgment, which goes ahead and causes the parties unnecessary pain. So the idea over here is the notion, and this is fascinating, the notion that we're going to judge Ruvain on Friday, give him his guilty verdict on Shabbos, and delay his execution until Sunday. It creates unnecessary pain for him. So I just want to point out how fascinating this is. First of all, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here. Rashi says Rashi. So I just point out how fascinating this is. If Ruvain is condemned to death, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? He's not a good guy. Yet, what do you see is asking about the halacha over here? The halacha is still concerned with the feelings of not a good guy, right? Which is quite fascinating. So even though Ruvain is liable to a death penalty, which means obviously he did something really bad. Just because someone did something really bad, it does not give a carte blanche to go ahead and mistreat them. So even in this case, you say to yourself, who cares? Who cares if he feels worse? Let him sit in the verdict for an extra day. Why does that matter to us? Because it does matter to us. because even though sometimes, again, people have to be punished, there's still a punishment that's done with dignity, and there's still a punishment that does not impose any unnecessary pain against the guilty party. It's incredible. So why don't we do this? I have a great idea. Adjudicate the case on Friday. Don't deliver the verdict on Shabbos. Instead, when should you deliver the verdict? Sunday. Just delay it to Sunday. Deliver the verdict to Sunday. And that way, again, that seems to accomplish everything. That way you slept on it. Verdict could be on Sunday. If he's guilty, you could execute him during the day on Sunday as well. We'll say it's incredible. To which the Gemara says, Minshu Tamayu. We're concerned, we'll say about this, that halacha l'maisa, the judges are going to forget their reasoning. Right? Since the case was on Friday, and then there's Shabbos in between, and remember again, they're not picking it up again until Sunday, we're concerned the judges are going to forget their rationale. So the Gemara says, now this is incredible. Now, Afa gav the Shnei Sofer and Hadayon and Omdun Lifnein, the Kosin Divrei Hamazikin, the Hamazakin, the Divrei Hamachayvin. Now, both saying, even though, interesting enough, remember, there are scribes, there are court scribes, there are stenographers who write down all of the reasoning, right? So they're writing down the logic of the judges who want to find guilty, the logic of the judges who want to find innocent. So it's all being recorded, right? The Gemara says, never, this is incredible. Nehi debepuma kasina. So remember again, what are the stenographers? What are the scribes? What do they write? They write that which the judges articulate. But listen to this. Liba de inish inshi. But ultimately, again, what's in my heart belongs to me. What's in my heart belongs to me. Now, I will say the truth is this phrase can be read really in two ways. Vedic Gemara is leading her of is liba de inshi, which means that which is in the heart can be forgotten. Now, what that means is, the Gemara says, is like essentially there's two parts to judgment. There's what the judge articulates, right? And what he articulates ultimately are the facts. But then part of human judgment, by definition, also has to be what? Like a little bit like what you feel in your kishkas. And that you can't articulate. But yet, interestingly enough, that is absolutely part and parcel of the judicial process. So the issue just is the stenographers could write down whatever the judges articulate. They can't write down what's in the kishkas. But what's in the kishkas is also necessary. So the problem is by the time we get to Sunday, and now again, if Sunday morning they're revisiting the verdict, they're revisiting the case, unfortunately the judge may have forgotten certain things, and that could compromise the effectiveness of the judgment. So we don't want that kind of delay. But I'll also just point out that you could read that phrase in a different way. Here Rashi says over here, liba de inshi, liba de inshi lo kasvi, va'af agav shezachar lo liyisod hatam, nishkach mi libo yeshuvo letamo, then yochel yashlo lo seis tamagon. So again, now the way the Gemara is understanding it over here is what's in the heart, liba de inshi, what's in a person's heart, inshi, he forgets. So you could also read the phrase, liba de inshi, inshi. What's in your heart is yours. No one else knows what is in your heart. Now I will say this is incredibly important on a couple of different levels. So number one, sometimes we see people do things, right? We hear people say things, they act in a certain way, and we are ready to go ahead and judge them in a particular way. Understand, you never know what's happening in a person's heart. You never know what's happening in a person's life. And if you operate with the general principle that at their core people are good, we're good. So if you see good people doing something bad, chances are there's something going on inside of them. You see them acting in a certain way that just seems out of character, chances are there's something going on inside of them. You can't see it. Why? Liba de inshi. What's happening inside of a person's heart, only they know about, no one else knows about. There's another application of this. No one knows what is happening in your heart. Sometimes we expect people to be there for us in difficult times. We expect people to help us when we're struggling. It is important to know, no one knows you're struggling unless you tell them you're struggling. No one knows that you're having a difficult time unless you tell them you're having a difficult time. And even people who love you very much and are very close to you, so I say how much relationship strain is created because people who we love very much expect us to know how they are feeling, even though they don't articulate how they're feeling to us. Remember, Nevuah ended with the second Beis HaMikdash. Hey, so the only way someone can know how you're feeling is if you tell them. And if you don't tell them, you can't. They can maybe intuit certain things, but remember, liba de inshi. Your heart is yours, and no one else really has a window into it but you. Incredible. Okay, let's go like this. So therefore, Hilchach. Therefore, also we exhausted all different possibilities, and therefore, Hilchach lo efshar. So now we understand why the Mishnah said that you can't adjudicate a capital case on a Friday, because essentially, again, there's no way to have this come out in a proper way. Incredible. So we'll say now, interestingly enough, the Gemara says one of the interesting facts that came out over here is that halacha l'maisa. So Beis execution does not go ahead and it's not docha. What's the word docha? Override. Doesn't override Shabbos. So the Gemara says, interesting. So the Gemara says, the burial of a meis mitzvah, remember again, what's a meis mitzvah? I'm walking down the road, I see an unburied body, that's called a meis mitzvah. There's no one here to bury it, I have an obligation to bury it. The obligation to bury a meis mitzvah should be docha Shabbos, from the Kal V'chomer. What's the Kal V'chomer? Uma avoda shedocha Shabbos. Right? Now, remember, avoda, sacrificial service in the Beis HaMikdash, right? Beis HaMikdash service is docha Shabbos. I was saying, even though Beis HaMikdash service has a lot of malachas in it, right? Carbon tummy, you shech the carbon tummy, right? We go ahead and we're putting ketoras on the coals, right? Mavir, right? Havara. We're doing a whole bunch of malachas, but you see temple service sets aside, overrides the halachas of Shabbos. So listen to this. Uma avodah shedocha Shabbos kvuras meis mitzvah docha oso milacha oso. Now listen to this. We'll say a meis mitzvah supersedes avodah. It overrides temple service. Now, where do we learn that from? We learn it from the word ula'achoso. So we'll say we're not going to go through this whole drasha, although it's a great Rashi to look at on your own. The pasuk is talking about la'aviv u'limo la'achiv ula'achoso lo yitama lehem mosam ki nezer elakav al rosho. So at the nazir, a person is a nazir, like the Kohen Gadol, ultimately again cannot become tummy for anyone, even the closest relatives. Now, I will say the issue over here is all the Torah needed to say is that a Nazir can't become tamei for anyone. It didn't have to say la'aviv, la'imo, la'achiv, la'achoso. You don't have to add that in. So there's different drashas from each one of these. What do you learn out from la'achoso? Okay, the sign. Listen to this. La'aviv, la'imo, la'achiv, la'achoso. Ma ta'un lomar. Why does the pasuk have to say even for a sister he can't become tamei? Watch this. Hare she'aholich lishchot es pisras. Well, here's what the Gemara is talking about. The Rashi points this out. We're talking about a Nazir who's the Kohen Gadol. The Mama's like an all-star. Probably so all-star, right? A Nazir who is the Kohen Gadol. Okay, now, boss, imagine the following scene. So hashaya lishchot es pischa v'lama lespeno. So let's say he's going to do the Korban Pesach, or he's going to give his son a circumcision. Let's focus on Korban Pesach. So the Nazir Kohen Gadol is going to offer up the Korban Pesach, a sacrificial item. And what happens? Amud days v'shama shemes lo mes, and he heard that his sister or one of his relatives passed away. Yachol yitama. You might have thought, listen, it's one of your close relatives. You have to turn around, go back and become tamei. Amrit lo yitama. The halacha is he can't become tamei, right? Again, if he's the Kohen Gadol, he's the Nazir. He can't become tamei for anyone, even his own family member. Yachol kishem shenem tamei lachoso kach eno tamei lemeis mitzvah. So I might have thought the same way that he can't become tamei for a family member, he also can't become tamei for a meis mitzvah. Tamalomar lachoso. Therefore, the pasuk says no for a sister. Lachoso de'enu matame avamatame hu avamatame lemeis mitzvah. Right? Ultimately, again, but he does become tamei for a mitzvah. So, what do you see from here? You see from here that meis mitzvah is docha everything. That even so, again, if the Kohen Gadol Nazir has a choice between a meis mitzvah and offering up the Korban Pesach, what does he do? Meis mitzvah. So now watch this. So now what we've established, let's follow the train of thought over here. What we've established is meis mitzvah overrides avoda, and avoda is docha Shabbos. So Rabbi say, what is it? Is it the Pythagorean theorem? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C? What is that? Oh, whatever, yeah. Good, right? Hey, so say, so good. I chose the rabbinate for a reason. Hey, so say, so the nice, right? So therefore, again, right, so here's what I have. I have ultimately, again, I have, right, if meis mitzvah is docha avoda is docha Shabbos, therefore the logical conclusion would be that meis mitzvah is docha Shabbos. So therefore, again, if I'm on my way to shul on Shabbos, and I go ahead and I see a mace mitzvah, halacha l'maisa again, I should be obligated to go ahead and bury the mace mitzvah. By the way, that is also a bona fide excuse for being late. I just want to point out, right? Mace mitzvah would work. So the Gemara says follows, Shabbos shinchis b'nei avoda. So again, if Shabbos is right, if avoda is docha Shabbos, right? Avoda is docha Shabbos, enodin shetei kvuras mace mitzvah docha osa. Ultimately, again, the burial of a mace mitzvah should also be docha Shabbos. So this is the argument. Now, listen, I want to point out, mace mitzvah is not a docha Shabbos, right? It's not docha Shabbos. We don't bury anyone on Shabbos, right? And not a mace mitzvah, not a regular person. So halacha l'maisa, again, the Gemara is asking, I don't understand the logic. Again, if mace mitzvah is docha avoda and avoda is docha Shabbos, then mace mitzvah should be docha Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Amrlei ritzicha tochiach shedoches avoda ve'ina doches haShabbos. Oh, so let's say I'll tell you the pircha, so to speak. Say the refutation of this. So execution itself will refute this argument. Why? Because Rabbi say we're going to see execution is docha avoda. Now what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is in the third short line. Ritzicha tochiach shedocha es avoda dichsiv me'im bizmizbechi tikachana lamos. So the Torah says that if somebody is liable to a death penalty, you take him even from the altar, even from the mizbeach, to be executed. Now, what does this mean? This is actually a fascinating case. Shim haya kohen rotzeach v'rotze lavod. So let's say you have a kohen who Rabbi say was found guilty, right? Is liable to a capital punishment, liable to a death penalty, but yet he wants to do the avoda. Mavin also lidun bebezdin or bevachlo yiridu me'al mizbeach mamish im kvar hischil d'chsimei mischil omal. So it's interesting. So let's say you have a kohen. Let's say a kohen who has been found guilty of a capital crime. But yet again, it's this Kohen's turn to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. So he's getting ready to do the avoda. We don't say, let him do the avoda and then we'll execute him. But rather, again, his death penalty overrides his obligation to do the avoda. Now, what we're going to see is, not the exception, but that is different than a case where, let's say the Kohen already started to do the avoda, then was found guilty of a capital crime, or was already found guilty, but started doing the avoda. We won't take him off the mizbeach, right? We won't take him. So in other words, we won't stop him in the middle of the avoda. If he already started, we'll let him finish. But if he wants to start, we're not going to let him start. So the idea over here is like this. The Gemara says, So here, execution, right? Execution does this. Execution, shedocha es avoda ve'ena docha es Shabbos. So as you see this ultimately again from Ritzicha, from execution. So execution is docha avoda, meaning if somebody is liable to a death penalty, so we don't let them do the avoda, but yet again we don't execute someone on Shabbos. What do you see from here? The formula doesn't necessarily work. Just because something is docha avoda doesn't mean that it is automatically docha Shabbos. Okay, so Gemara says as follows. But one second. Ritzicha gufa titches Shabbos v'kal v'chomer. But one second. Let's turn that on its head. Right? So let's go ahead and say execution should also be docha Shabbos. Why not allow for execution to be docha Shabbos? After all, again, I will say, why don't we say the following? From Kal V'chomer, here we go. Ma avoda shedocha Shabbos. So again, avoda is docha Shabbos. That we've established, right? You could do temple service on Shabbos. And halacha, remember again, avoda requires malacha, and yet you're still allowed to do it on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Ma avoda shedocha Shabbos, ritzicha docha osa. And I will say, remember again. So now you have avoda is docha Shabbos, and execution is docha avoda, right? So we can flip it around, right? So if execution is docha avoda, and avoda is docha Shabbos, then what? Then execution should be docha Shabbos as well. To which the Gemara says, right? Shabbos nitcha mipnei avoda enodin shetei ritzicha docha osa. So then again, if ritzicha, right? If execution is docha Shabbos, if execution is docha avoda, and avoda is docha Shabbos, then execution should be docha Shabbos. Amar Rava, so Rava said, Kvar Pascha Tan Rabbi Shmuel. So this is already pasking on. Well, what was pasking on? I will say the Tan Rabbi Shmuel Lo Sevaru Eish. Listen to this. So the Torah says you shall not go ahead and kindle a fire on Shabbos. Interestingly enough, remember, we know this, that the Lamates Malachos, the 39 property categories of labor on Shabbos, are not explicitly stated. Where they learn from? The juxtaposition of the section of the Mishkan to Shabbos. And it teaches us whatever labor was needed for the construction or fabrication of the Mishkan ultimately becomes one of the prohibited categories of labor for Shabbos. There is one malacha which is stated explicitly, and that is havara, kindling. So why was havara singled out? Why was it singled out? So the Gemara says, so ultimately, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's for the purposes of a lav. What does that mean? It's there to go ahead, I will say, to teach us that whereas every single other malacha is punishable by a death penalty, so ultimately, again, havara is only, quote-unquote, punishable by a lav. Okay? And according to Rabbi Nassan, ultimately, again, it's to distinguish between malachos, to teach me that the same way that havara is singled out, if a person does multiple malachos in one helam, right, in one, we'll call it moment, right, one span of time, that there's individual liability for each of those malachos. So we'll say, Kirisanyo, havara lalaviyatzas, the Rabbi Yossi says that havara was singled out in order to teach us that havara is not punishable by death, but rather, again, havara is punishable by a lav. Rabbi Nassan says, l'chalik yatzasa. Ultimately, again, havara is singled out to teach us that just as havara is singled out, so too there is individual liability for every malacha that is performed. I will say, now, remember, but there's another point in all of this. What's the other point in all of this? Is that, remember, certain misos based in, right, certain types of miso, like, for example, sreifa, which is with hot lead, requires havara. The fact that the Torah goes out of its way to say that you can't do havara on Shabbos, the Gemara understands even for execution purposes you can't do havara. So therefore, even though one could construct a very good kal v'chomer, right, which essentially says that if execution overrides avoda, and avoda overrides Shabbos, so execution should override Shabbos. That is it's a good, logically sound argument, because the Torah goes out of its way to say there is no kindling on Shabbos, and certain misos bezin required kindling. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, no executions on Shabbos. Incredible. Rava said, Tana moshavos kashile. The Tana was bothered by something else. Right? The Tana was bothered by something else. So he was bothered by the use of the word moshavos. Torah says, lo sevaru eish b'chol moshavos sechem b'yom HaShabbos. Torah says you shall not kindle a fire in all of your domiciles, all of your dwellings. Now, in general, whenever the Torah uses the word Moshe Seichem, what does that come to teach us? That halacha l'maisa, this halacha applies both in Eretz Yisrael and out of Eretz Yisrael. The issue is, it appears to be unnecessary in this pasuk. Why? We'll say, in general, whenever a mitzvah is what we call a chiyuv on the gavra, a chiyuv on the individual, it applies everywhere. I don't need Moshe Seichem. So here, this is Hilchos Shabbos. Why do you need to tell me that Hilchos Shabbos, or specifically Havara, applies B'chol Moshe Seichem? I understand that it's going to apply everywhere. Why would I think that it wouldn't apply everywhere? To which the Gemara says, why did the Torah need to say Moshe Seichem by Havara, by kindling on Shabbos? It's understood. Michti, Shabbos Chovas Hagufi. Shabbos says the Chovas Haguf. Remember again, what does it mean the Chovas Haguf? It's an obligation on the individual. Right? In other words, it's not geographic and it's not agricultural. It's on the individual. The Chovas Haguf, no Heges Bein Baris, Bein B'chutz La'aretz. And I will say every Chovas Haguf, remember again, applies automatically both in Eretz Yisrael as well as outside of Eretz Yisrael. Moshavos the Kasav Rachman Alamali. So why do I need the Torah to say Moshe Seichem? Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Amar Talmud Echad, because one of the Talmidim said in Rabbi Shmuel, Lefi Shneimar Kiyeh Beish Chet Mishpat Maves V'Humas. Torah says if a person will be liable to a death penalty and he's put to death. Shomea Ani Bein B'Chol Bein B'Shabbos. I would have thought execution occurs both during the week as well as on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, "Vaha mani mekai mechalaleha mos yumas." I said, what does it mean? But yet the Torah says that if you violate Shabbos, you're chayiv for that. So again, isn't going ahead and organizing an execution in and of itself a form of Shabbos violation? I would have said no. That applies b'shar misos chutz mimisas bezdin. that applies to other melachos, but doesn't apply to an execution arranged by Beis Din. Execution arranged by Beis Din should be fine. So the Gemara says, oh, eino ela afilu misas Beis Din, or maybe no. Maybe again, the prohibition of Shabbos Malacha applies even to Beis Din warranted execution. Or ma'ani mekayim v'chumas. And what is it when it says the Beis Din executes someone? B'chol avalo b'Shabbos. That's only during the week, but not on Shabbos itself. Oh, eino ela afilu b'Shabbos. Or maybe even on Shabbos, Beis Din can execute. Talmud Lomar lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvo seichem. Therefore, I will say again, the Torah says, do not kindle a fire in all of your domiciles. But why la'alanu omer v'hayu eila lachem l'chukas mishpat l'dorosechem b'chol moshvosechem. This should be for you a statute of law. In all generations, b'chol moshvosechem ma moshavos ha'amar la'alan Beis Din af moshavos ha'amar kan Beis Din. So we'll say, listen to this. The Torah purposely uses the lashon of lo sevarosh b'chol moshvosechem. Why? Because chol moshvosechem, the lashon of moshavos, is also used in the paz that teaches you about establishing courts, establishing batei din. Where you're supposed to establish batei din? Everywhere you live. And the Torah uses the lashon of moshavos by Beis Din and moshavos by Shabbos prohibition to teach us what? The same prohibitions that apply for Shabbos individuals apply for batei din. And therefore, again, a Beis Din is not allowed to execute on Shabbos. Therefore, the Torah says, do not kindle a fire in all of your moshavos. Dafka use it. Remember again, I don't need lashon of moshavos by Shabbos. Why? Because Shabbos is a chiv on the gavra, a chiv on the individual. Any chiv on the gavra on the individual applies there in chuzlar. It's why I need moshvosechem, because that same word is used by batei din to teach me that the same Shabbos prohibitions apply to batei din. Therefore, a Beis Din is not allowed to execute someone on the Shabbos. So I'm going to say, stop, but we're not finished with this yet, but a good place to stop. Shkoyach. All right, I will say, Chevron Zoom, have a wonderful day. Good to see everyone.